No one can quite understand why you hurt so badly. But I'm not gonna cry.
Even all these years after their relationship first exploded into public view, the story of LeAnn Rimes and Eddie Cibrian refuses to fade into the background. What began as a Hollywood collision on the set of Northern Lights has stretched into a 15-year marriage marked by reinvention, scrutiny, and constant reinterpretation. Now, LeAnn Rimes has finally admitted what we all suspected about Eddie Cibrian. Let's start this story from the very beginning. A star is born. A reputation is built. By the time LeAnn Rimes was 6, she was already performing in talent shows across Texas, where her family had relocated. At age 13 in 1996, she released Blue, an album anchored by a song recorded when she was just 11. The record exploded, selling over 6 million copies in the United States alone. Within months, she became the youngest person ever to win a Grammy Award for Best New Artist, and the youngest to win Best Female Country Vocal Performance. The late 1990s didn't slow her down. If anything, she only picked up pace. In 1997, How Do I Live became one of the longest charting songs in Billboard Hot 100 history, staying on the chart for 69 weeks. The song bridged country and pop audiences, pushing Rimes beyond Nashville into global markets. By the early 2000s, she had sold tens of millions of records worldwide, eventually surpassing 37 million in total career sales. But behind the numbers, another narrative was forming. Fame had arrived early. Contracts were signed even earlier, and legal battles with her father over management and finances surfaced in 2000, exposing the machinery behind her success. At 17, she filed a lawsuit. At 18, she was renegotiating control over her career. The image of the effortless prodigy was already cracking. In 2002, at just 19 years old, Rimes married dancer and chef Dean Sheramet. The wedding, held in Texas, saw a young star choosing domestic life amid global fame. Sheramet, who had worked as a backup dancer for artists like Christina Aguilera, stepped into a quieter role as Rimes's career partner and later her personal chef during tours. Publicly, the relationship projected calm, red carpet appearances, joint interviews, and a sense of grounding. Privately, it existed under the constant pressure of a career that required relentless travel, recording schedules, and public visibility. By the mid-2000s, Rimes was balancing pop reinvention with country roots, releasing albums like Twisted Angel and This Woman, each marking a shift in sound and audience. While Rimes was navigating music superstardom, across a different corner of the industry, Eddie Cibrian was building a career of his own. He entered television in the early 1990s, landing roles in soap operas like The Young and the Restless and Sunset Beach. From 1999 to 2005, he starred as firefighter Jimmy Doherty on Third Watch, a procedural drama set in New York City that ran for 6 seasons and over 130 episodes. The role didn't make him a household name, but it gave him something equally valuable in Hollywood: longevity. Cibrian's career continued with guest roles and recurring appearances, including a stint on CSI Miami in 2009, where he played Jesse Cardoza. Behind the curtain, in 2001, Cibrian married Brandi Glanville, years before her eventual rise to fame on The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. At the time, she was a model, moving between fashion campaigns and media appearances. Their marriage produced 2 sons, Mason and Jake. For nearly a decade, their relationship remained largely outside the tabloid spotlight. By the late 2000s, the contrast between these 2 lives was striking. Rimes was a global music figure shaped by early fame, legal battles, and constant reinvention. Cibrian was a working actor with a stable career and a growing family. Their worlds operated on different frequencies, but both were approaching a point of transition. The Collision Course, a movie that changed everything. In 2008, under the controlled lights of a television set, two carefully managed lives intersected in a way neither publicist could contain. LeAnn Rimes and Eddie Cibrian were cast as romantic leads in the Lifetime movie Northern Lights, filmed primarily in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. The project itself was a made-for-TV adaptation of a Nora Roberts novel, scheduled for a 2009 release, had a modest budget, and was targeted at a predictable audience. Rimes, already a global recording artist, was expanding her acting resume. Cibrian, a seasoned television actor, was continuing his steady climb. On paper, it was just another production. But the timing was precise. Both were married, both were in long-term relationships, and both were entering phases of personal transition that weren't yet public. Filming schedules stretched across weeks, isolating cast and crew in a location far removed from their everyday lives. Long shooting days, rehearsals, and on-screen intimacy blurred into off-screen familiarity. Rimes was still married to Dean Sheramet, her husband of 6 years. Cibrian was married to Brandi Glanville, with whom he shared 2 young sons. At first, there was just proximity, chemistry, and a production environment that demanded emotional connection. But by late 2008, industry rumors began circulating. Crew members noticed closeness. Insiders hinted at something more than professionalism. Then, in March 2009, the story detonated. Paparazzi photographs surfaced, published by outlets including Us Weekly, showing Rimes and Cibrian dining together at restaurants in Laguna Beach, California, far from any film set. Within days, the narrative shifted from rumor to confirmed affair. Headlines spread across entertainment media, and the story escalated beyond Hollywood gossip into mainstream news coverage. The reaction was immediate and disproportionately intense. Rimes, in particular, became the focal point of public backlash. Her image, built over a decade as a country prodigy turned pop crossover success, collided with the moral expectations placed on her audience-facing persona. Talk shows, tabloids, and online forums dissected every detail. Cibrian faced criticism as well, but the scrutiny leaned heavily toward Rimes. The story was no longer about a film. It was about betrayal, perception, and the unraveling of 2 marriages in real time. Public statements followed. Rimes issued an apology in March 2009, acknowledging that she had taken responsibility for her actions and expressing regret for the pain caused. Cibrian also released a statement, describing the situation as a mistake. But the damage was already systemic. Dean Sheramet moved out of the couple's shared home. Brandi Glanville, meanwhile, spoke openly in interviews about the impact on her family. Throughout 2009, the media cycle intensified rather than faded. Every appearance, every sighting of Rimes and Cibrian was documented. They were photographed together in Los Angeles, in restaurants, and at events. What might have once been a discreet Hollywood affair had become a sustained, visible partnership under scrutiny. In June 2010, Rimes finalized her divorce from Sheramet, closing an 8-year chapter that had begun when she was still a teenager. The settlement details were not fully public, but the separation marked a definitive end to a relationship that had once symbolized stability in her early career. Months later, in September 2010, Cibrian's divorce from Glanville was finalized, after 9 years of marriage. Custody arrangements for their 2 sons became part of the post-divorce structure. 2 marriages, both exceeding half a decade, ended within the same calendar year. Between late 2008 and late 2010, 4 lives were reconfigured. By the time Northern Lights aired in March 2009, its storyline, a romantic drama set against a quiet backdrop, had been eclipsed by the real-life narrative surrounding its leads. Viewership came not just from fans of the genre, but from audiences already aware of the off-screen events. The film became inseparable from the controversy, its release date aligning almost perfectly with the peak of media coverage. What was intended as a standalone television movie had instead become the origin point of one of the most talked-about relationship scandals of its time. And unlike most Hollywood controversies, this one didn't fade quickly. In the years following the split, Brandi Glanville became one of the most vocal and consistent narrators of what had happened. Through interviews with outlets like Us Weekly, E! News, and appearances on The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills beginning in 2011, she described the emotional fallout in blunt, unfiltered terms. In one widely cited interview, she said, "My life blew up overnight." She also framed the experience as deeply destabilizing on a personal level, stating, "It was so public and so humiliating." In multiple interviews between 2011 and 2013, Glanville emphasized that the pain was not limited to the relationship itself, but to how it unfolded in front of a global audience. It wasn't just the cheating, it was the way it all played out in the press, she explained in one television appearance, reinforcing a recurring theme that media coverage turned a personal crisis into a prolonged public ordeal. That perspective was expanded in 2013 with the release of her memoir, Drinking and Tweeting, and Other Brandi Blunders. The book offered a detailed first-person reconstruction of events, including the discovery of the affair and its aftermath. In one of its most quoted lines, she wrote, "I felt like my life had been hijacked, capturing the sense of sudden loss of control." Elsewhere, she described the experience as a very public breakup that I didn't sign up for. The publication of Drinking and Tweeting also extended the lifespan of the controversy in measurable ways. Released 4 years after the initial scandal broke in 2009, it reintroduced the narrative to both existing audiences and new readers who may not have followed the original events in real time. The book became a New York Times bestseller, further amplifying its reach and ensuring that the story re-entered mainstream discussion. On the other side of the narrative, Rimes became the subject of persistent and often polarized media framing. Beyond the confirmed affair, she faced repeated allegations in entertainment reporting that suggested obsessive behavior toward Cibrian during the early stages of their relationship. These claims included reports of excessive contact and emotional fixation, though they were widely disputed and never substantiated through legal findings. Still, in the media, such narratives gained traction quickly. In any case, a new chapter was about to unfold. Against the Odds, Marriage and Reinvention. On April 22, 2011, in a quiet, private ceremony in California, LeAnn Rimes and Eddie Cibrian formalized a relationship that had already survived years of public scrutiny. There were no televised exclusives, no major magazine spreads released in real time, and no staged media rollout. Instead, it was deliberately contained to draw a clear boundary between the years of controversy and what they hoped would come next: stability. At that point, Rimes was 28 years old and already a multi-decade veteran of the music industry. She had entered fame as a child, but by the 2010s, her career was defined less by breakthrough success and more by reinvention. Following the marriage, she continued releasing music, including the album Spitfire in 2013, which debuted at number 9 on the Billboard 200. The record marked a shift in tone, less country pop crossover ambition, more introspective songwriting shaped by personal experience and media exposure. Touring remained part of her career structure, but it was no longer the only axis. Television appearances, guest roles, and reality programming began to appear alongside her music work. One of the most direct attempts to reshape public perception came in 2014 with the reality series LeAnn and Eddie, which aired on VH1. The show followed Rimes and Cibrian as a married couple navigating blended family dynamics and ongoing media attention. Unlike traditional celebrity reality formats built around conflict escalation, this series leaned into controlled narrative framing. It addressed public criticism directly, including the lingering perception of their relationship's origins, and attempted to present a normalized domestic structure. The series ran for one season, but it reflected a broader strategy, moving from reactive publicity to authored visibility. Meanwhile, Cibrian's career trajectory remained anchored in television, but with more variation in role selection. After earlier work on series like CSI, Miami, and Third Watch, he continued appearing in both dramatic and daytime formats. In 2013, he joined the cast of The Young and the Restless, one of the longest-running soap operas in American television history, where he played Detective Russell. The role reintroduced him to a serialized audience format, one that emphasized continuity and long-term character development over episodic guest appearances. Later, he appeared in projects like Country Comfort, a Netflix series that leaned into family-centered storytelling and comedy drama structure, showing a shift toward lighter, more domestic narratives in his work. Behind the public-facing careers, the couple's shared focus increasingly centered on managing perception and maintaining personal structure under sustained attention. Interviews over the years frequently referenced therapy, communication strategies, and emotional recalibration. Rimes has spoken in various media appearances about learning to navigate public judgment that had followed her since childhood fame, while Cibrian has tended to frame their relationship in terms of stability and routine. Then there was family integration. Cibrian's two sons from his previous marriage to Brandi Glanville, Mason and Jake, remained central to his life structure. This required ongoing coordination between households, especially as the children grew older and entered adolescence. As the years progressed, the intensity of media coverage gradually shifted. The early period of near-daily tabloid reporting gave way to more intermittent resurfacing, often tied to anniversaries, interviews, or reality television appearances. The narrative surrounding Rimes and Cibrian began to stabilize, not because the past was forgotten, but because it became context rather than headline. Entertainment media increasingly treated their relationship as a long-term case study in celebrity endurance rather than an ongoing scandal. However, complete normalization never fully occurred. Online discourse, particularly on social platforms, continued to reference the origins of their relationship, demonstrating how digital memory extends the lifespan of celebrity narratives far beyond traditional news cycles. Even as their public appearances became more routine and less controversial, older coverage remained easily accessible, reinforcing the continuity of the original storyline. What changed most significantly over time was tone. 15 years later, love tested again. In April 2026, a relationship that began under the harshest possible spotlight marked a milestone few once expected it would reach. 15 years of marriage between LeAnn Rimes and Eddie Cibrian. On Instagram, Rimes publicly acknowledged that the anniversary period was unfolding under what she described as Very tense, heart-wrenching things happening at home with family. The phrasing was careful but loaded, signaling emotional strain without offering specifics. In an era where celebrity transparency is often expected in real time, the absence of detail stood out just as much as the message itself. No names were mentioned, no incident was described, and no timeline was clarified. The ambiguity became part of the story. Despite the tension, the couple stepped away briefly from their routine and traveled to Cabo San Lucas, Mexico, for a short 3-day retreat. Cabo, a frequent destination for Hollywood figures seeking privacy within controlled luxury environments, has long served as a temporary escape from Los Angeles media visibility. The trip, based on Rimes's post, was not positioned as a vacation in the traditional sense, but as a pause, a contained window of distance. Rimes described the anniversary experience using phrases that combined contrast rather than clarity. She referenced tears and worry, but also moments of laughter and deep gratitude. The structure of the message suggested coexistence rather than resolution. Distress existing alongside appreciation, strain alongside connection. In public terms, it was not a declaration of crisis or stability, but something in between, an unresolved emotional state made visible through selective disclosure. What stood out in the coverage was what was not said. No explanation was provided regarding the family issues, leaving interpretation open-ended. That silence immediately generated speculation across entertainment media and social platforms, where past patterns of scrutiny tend to re-emerge quickly. Yet neither Rimes nor Cibrian expanded on the statement publicly in the immediate aftermath, maintaining a deliberate boundary around private details. In the same post, Rimes reinforced continuity rather than collapse. She emphasized that 15 years is just the beginning, a phrase that reframed the milestone not as an endpoint, but as a continuation point. The wording aligned with a broader pattern in her public communication over the years, where long-term endurance is framed as active work rather than passive survival. It also subtly reinforced commitment at a moment when external curiosity might have expected instability. The couple's history adds weight to how this moment is interpreted. Their relationship has already passed through multiple high-pressure phases. Its controversial beginning during the filming of Northern Lights in 2008. The collapse of 2 prior marriages by 2010, and a highly public transition into marriage in 2011. Over the years, they have also navigated blended family dynamics involving Cibrian's sons from his previous marriage to Brandi Glanville, as well as ongoing career demands in music and television. That history is why even limited statements carry amplified significance. Their relationship has never existed outside a public context. It has been shaped within it. Early media narratives framed them through scandal. Later coverage focused on longevity and adaptation. Professionally, both have continued active careers while maintaining relatively controlled public exposure compared to the intensity of their earlier years. Rimes has remained involved in music, live performances, and media appearances, while also engaging in selective television projects and interviews. Cibrian has continued acting in television roles, balancing work with family commitments. Neither has stepped away from public life, but both have operated within a more managed visibility structure than in the peak media years of their controversy. This is a relationship that has repeatedly absorbed pressure from outside forces, such as media scrutiny, public judgment, blended family challenges, and professional demands, and continued forward despite predictions of collapse. Through it all, what remains consistent is the couple's public positioning. Even in moments of strain, the framing emphasizes continuity rather than separation. There is no indication of formal breakdown, no public legal shift, and no announcement of separation. Instead, the language centers on endurance and time. 15 years have already passed. A future is still being acknowledged. This is not the ending. It's just another beginning. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.